Hi, this is Queenie Villaganas, and in this video, I am going to discuss the Victorian period and some of the authors during this era. The Victorian era is the period between approximately 1820 and 1914, corresponding roughly but not exactly to the period of Queen Victoria's reign. It is characterized by a class-based society, a growing number of people able to vote, a growing state and economy, and Britain's status as the most powerful empire in the world. The period saw the British Empire grow to become the first global industrial power, producing much of the world's coal, iron, steel, and textiles. By this time, the role of the monarch was to reign rather than rule. This era also saw the revolutionary breakthrough in the arts and sciences which shaped the world as we know it today. These rapid transformations also led to many social changes with the birth and spread of political movements. Literature was an accessible and pervasive part of Victorian society. Studying it is crucial in understanding the attitudes and concerns of the people who lived during this era. Much of the writing during this time was a reaction to the rapidly changing notions of science, morality, and society. One of the most famous novelists and poet during this time is Emily Bronte. Emily Bronte was born on July 30, 1818 in Thornton, Yorkshire, England, and died on December 19, 1848 due to tuberculosis. Her full name is Emily Jane Bronte, and she uses the pseudonym Ellis Bill because during this time, female writers are not yet accepted. Her sisters, namely Charlotte and Anne Bronte, are also writers just like her. She produced her one and only novel, Wuthering Heights, in 1847. It was a highly imaginative work of passion and hate set on the Yorkshire moors. This novel has a predominant mysterious setting that mirrors the author's personality, for she was a silent, reserved, and left no correspondence of interest. There are two narrators in the novel, which provides the readers with a dual viewpoint. Emily Bronte liked to experiment with different techniques of writing, and it is evident in the portrayal of characters in this novel. Wuthering Heights opens in 1801, and at that time in England the Industrial Revolution was underway and British society was beginning to change. When Emily wrote the book, the effects of this change were being seen in the rise of old money to new money. A man could now raise his social standing by acquiring wealth, whereas in the past, one had to be born into an upper class family in order to be considered a gentleman. The time in which Wuthering Heights is set does matter a great deal. The novel also deals with the shift away from the old farming culture and the strict patriarchal family life, and towards a more urban way of life with an increase in equality for all. Also, the rights of women were severely restricted by society and laws. The reason why the author herself used a male pseudonym as female writers were not readily accepted during this time. Another influence in this novel was the folklore in the Yorkshire. References to folk beliefs and rituals are scattered through Wuthering Heights, particularly with the reference to the death watch traditional in Yorkshire, as when Edgar, the character in the novel, sits the entire night with Catherine's body after her death. Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights is marked by several central themes: good versus evil, judgment versus pity, violence and revenge, love and obsession, and belonging. Good versus evil is an exploration of religious-based ideas of good and evil create the primary theme in Wuthering Heights. And the themes of judgment versus pity, love and obsession, and violence and revenge, which are also religiously rooted, support it. Pity, humility, love, and forgiveness, the opposite of revenge, add up to choosing good, while judgment, pride, obsession, and violence add up to choosing evil. The second half of the novel shows individual characters who lean toward the good: Catherine, Isabella, Hareton, Edgar, and Mrs. Dean, battling evil represented by Heathcliff. Then the theme culminates with Heathcliff's ultimate choice between good and evil. Mrs. Dean's character is the representative of the good qualities of love, pity, humility, and forgiveness. Heathcliff and Cathy represent the evil choices of violence, revenge, pride, selfishness, judgment, and obsession. Judgment versus pity. Bronte differentiates between biblical judgment as reserved for the divine and personal judgment between individuals, which is always accompanied with a choice between judgment and pity. Generally, a lack of pity leads to pain, injustice, and suffering for the person judged, making the thematic statement that to judge others is harmful to them, unjust, and not a right reserved for human beings. Repeatedly, the reader is provoked to feel pity over judgment for the characters, even Heathcliff and Hindley, and shown the disturbing results of an absence of pity, such as Linton's treatment to Catherine and his ensuing horrible death. Violence and revenge. Through Hindley and Heathcliff's relationship, Bronte begins a complex argument about the effects of physical violence. Her first point is to show how abuse creates abusive, vengeful individuals when they do not forgive and turn violent to lessen the pain. Isabella represents the wise individual who understands the true nature of violence and its consequences. Love and obsession. In the first half of Wuthering Heights, through Heathcliff and Cathy, Bronte suggests that to go against one's heart and soul is against love and equivalent to death, since Cathy dies for making the wrong choice. Then she's then she shows how making love an obsession by choosing human love over godly, heavenly love becomes love turned evil and idolatrous, with several references to Cathy and Heathcliff making each other an idol. Belonging. The setting of the two opposing households, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, combined with the symbolism of the moors between them and Cathy's wandering ghost, highlights the devastating isolation individuals feel while searching and seeking a sense of belonging. Human beings, Bronte demonstrates through this theme, must align with their true destinies, whether they, figuratively speaking, encounter walls they must climb over, discover windows and doors barred and locked, or set out on a journey to explore. There are a few key characters whose intergenerational feuds comprise the Gothic saga that is Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff is the anti-hero of Wuthering Heights. Adopted as an orphan by Mr. Earnshaw, Heathcliff is favored by his adoptive father over his own son, Hindley, who comes to loathe and resent Heathcliff, but Heathcliff and his adoptive sister Cathy become inseparable. Cathy is Heathcliff's best childhood friend and his true love. She is selfish and passionate. She goes mad when she goes against her heart and soul and chooses Edgar Linton over Heathcliff. She dies young while giving birth to her only daughter, Catherine, and her memory and ghost haunt Heathcliff for the rest of his life. Catherine, Cathy's daughter with Edgar, is a kind, sweet young woman unlike her mother. She lives with her father at Thrushcross Grange. At first, she despises Hareton for being an uneducated servant, and she falls in love with her sickly, bookish cousin Linton. But in the end, Linton and Catherine marry. Mrs. Dean is the main narrator of Wuthering Heights, and she tells the epic history of Heathcliff as well as the Linton and Earnshaw families to Mr. Lockwood. She plays the role of mother, protector, judge, and conscience to the major characters. Edgar is a snobbish boy who grows up to be a kind-spirited gentleman as an adult, and later became the master of Thrushcross Grange. He marries Cathy and remains devoted to her. Hareton's mother dies at birth and his father Hindley self-destructs. Hareton falls into Heathcliff's clutches and is turned against his father and the trappings of upper-class society. He lives a simple life, blissfully unaware he is a brute. Hindley is the true villain of the story. He becomes master of Wuthering Heights, whose jealousy and malice drive him to physical violence and degradation of Heathcliff, which ignites Heathcliff and Cathy's thwarted love and spurs Heathcliff's destructive plans for revenge. The action of Nellie Dean's story begins in the 1770s, and all the action of Wuthering Heights takes place in or around two neighboring houses on the Yorkshire moors. The settings in Wuthering Heights are majorly at odds, which establishes two contrasting moods. Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange are the two main residences in this novel, and they're pretty much complete opposites of each other. Wuthering Heights is a rundown, old, and mysterious place, which creates a rather gloomy and somber mood. Thrushcross Grange, on the other hand, is a very elegant and sophisticated place, which tends to create a peaceful mood. Wuthering Heights is a Gothic novel. The tone is constantly mysterious and sinister. In this story, things never seem to stop getting grimmer. On the contrary, there are some glimpses of hope. The brief flashes mostly occur in the years after Catherine's death. The characters and narrators also help configure the tone. When Heathcliff's around, everything seems to get very ominous. Wuthering Heights is a highly structured narrative technique. There are two narrators, Lockwood and Nellie Dean, yet the main story is presented in a dramatic form in which dialogue plays a great part. The presence of two narrators does not mean that the events are told from two different perspectives. It only suggests a multi-layered story. Lockwood provides the present or real-time narrative. When he enters to rent Thrushcross Grange, a larger part of the action is already over. He meets his landlord Heathcliff, finds everything around him quite eerie, and asks Nellie Dean to tell him the story of his landlord. Nellie Dean has the responsibility to tell the past events that she has herself watched. Thus, she describes the past. She provides the inner frame to the story as she has taken part in the happenings. She, being a governess of Cathy, lends an element of authenticity to the narrative that seeks to depict the clash of elemental passion of love. The reason why the novelist has used such an intricate narrative technique is to make the story seem plausible and convincing to the readers who would have found it beyond sensible comprehension. In the introduction of Wuthering Heights, Mr. Lockwood, a gentleman from the city, rents Thrushcross Grange, an estate in the wild English countryside of Yorkshire. He sets out to meet his landlord Heathcliff, who lives at Wuthering Heights, an estate across the moors. The residents of Wuthering Heights, who appear to have no respect for social customs. The weather forces Mr. Lockwood to spend the night in a bedroom, which turns out to be haunted by a ghost named Cathy. During the rising action, Mrs. Dean, a servant at Thrushcross Grange, recalls Heathcliff's life story. Long ago, Heathcliff, a homeless orphan boy, is brought home by Mr. Earnshaw. Mr. Earnshaw's children, Hindley and Cathy, despises Heathcliff for being a dark-complexioned gypsy with an ugly temperament. Mr. Earnshaw favors Heathcliff, driving Hindley to violence and hatred, but Cathy and Heathcliff became inseparable. Hindley is sent to college and returns with a wife. When Mr. Earnshaw dies, Hindley becomes master of Wuthering Heights and turns Heathcliff into a servant, humiliating and abusing him. One night, Cathy and Heathcliff sneak over to Thrushcross Grange to spy on the wealthy Linton children. Isabella and Edgar. When a dog bites Kathy, the children are caught. The Lintons take Kathy in, but sends Heathcliff home, rejecting him. Kathy returns 5 weeks later, transformed into an upper-class woman. She and Heathcliff becomes distant as Kathy and Edgar grow closer and accepts Edgar's marriage proposal, though she confesses her deep love to Heathcliff to Mrs. Dean. Heathcliff runs away and returns 3 years later to wreak revenge for all the wrongs done to him in childhood. Hindley's wife has died, leaving him to raise their child, Hareton. Hindley has cursed God and become abusive and alcoholic. Heathcliff takes control of Wuthering Heights and manipulates Hareton to love him more than his own father. Heathcliff visits Cathy at Thrushcross Grange, and they confess love to each other. Isabella falls for Heathcliff, who exploits her to seek revenge on Edgar. Heathcliff marries Isabella but abuses her. Cathy is driven to madness when Heathcliff is forbidden to visit her because of a fight between him and Edgar. Pregnant with Edgar's child, Cathy dies, but before she died, Cathy gives birth to her only daughter, Catherine. Isabella runs away, then gives birth to a baby she had with Heathcliff, which is Linton. Edgar raises Catherine alone at Thrushcross Grange. Hindley dies, so Heathcliff raises Hareton alone at Wuthering Heights. Eventually, Catherine meets Hareton. Isabella dies, and Linton comes to live at Thrushcross Grange, but Heathcliff demands to raise his own son and forces Linton to live at Wuthering Heights. Linton, a sickly pampered child, is used by Heathcliff to gain control at Thrushcross Grange. Linton and Catherine marry, and Catherine nurses Linton as he dies. Afterward, she and Hareton, whom Catherine has always disliked, become friends. Haunted by Cathy's memory for 18 years, the climax of the novel sees Heathcliff loses will to live and declines into an early death, failing to deliver the final blow to complete his revenge. During the falling action, Mrs. Dean recalls to Mr. Lockwood how Heathcliff came to die, and Mr. Lockwood leaves, but later returns to visit, and Catherine and Hareton regain their estates Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights, and fall in love. In the resolution, they plan to marry at New Year's Day. Some of the moral of this novel is to learn to take care of yourself and take everything in stride. Children at Wuthering Heights have an especially difficult time surviving. It's a cutthroat environment where parents are prone to shaking their children and dropping them over staircase banisters. This is an unacceptable behavior but emphasizes how important it is to be able to take care of oneself. Sometimes life can be difficult, but at least you can do is make your own health and happiness a priority. Take everything in stride. Accepting random acts of violence as part of your daily routine is not recommended. However, as disturbed as the inhabitants of Wuthering Heights can be, they don't allow such strange events to get in their way. Weird things happen and everyone moves on. Going with the flow and not getting hung up over a few mishaps is an excellent philosophy to keep in mind. And that is the end of our lesson for today. I hope you learned something from spending your time watching this video. This is Queenie Villaganas. Thank you for watching.